Okay, so my name is Jim Burrows. I'm an attorney in Watertown with Kendall Walton and Burrows. My office represents the town. The town has asked me for assistance as it goes through this process. But let me, and I'll try to speak to the public as well, Mr. Supervisor. But let me kind of explain kind of what happens. So if you think of it with towns, when towns provide certain services, they've got to go through some unique procedures in the town to provide water or sewer. They can't just do it townwide. They have to form a district. And there's a lengthy process to form a district. If a district is formed, if everything's set, then if the cards align, you get the funding in place, you can go forward with those public improvement projects. The town of Lyme is in that process now with Article 12A of the town law, where it's looking to form this water district number 6, also known as a Point Salubrious district. Now there's many steps in that process. The most recent step that the town board had gone through was to adopt a resolution to form this water district subject to permissive referendum. Now that's kind of unique here, because what happens then, if you think of it, is the town follows these statutory steps, gets to a point where the information from the public, information from the engineers indicates to the board that going forward with this improvement district makes sense for the public to have abundant potable water. When they adopt a resolution, though, it doesn't end the process. We say it's subject to permissive referendum, and all that means is this, that if the necessary petition signed by enough people who are eligible to sign the petition, if they sign that petition, that triggers the next step, which is a referendum, an actual vote by certain persons about whether the district goes forward or not. Now that's that process that we're in right now. Now what I did was we got the information from the town's engineers about the properties. 329 parcels were involved with this, and we looked at the information from the engineers. But the reality is this: the engineers just get snapshots from the county as far as who owns what parcels. That information all the time is not accurate. So we had to go forward and say, well, we need to make sure we know who are the owners of the properties, because by identifying the owners, we can then determine whether they're eligible to sign a petition or whether they can vote if there's a referendum, or if it gets far enough down the line, whether we know that we've got the right people to sign easements. Now the town clerk, Ari, she's got a couple thousand pages, which are lien searches from all these properties. That's got the most recent information on the owners. What happened was indeed here, there was a petition submitted. We went through, we got the lien searches from the abstractors. We went through the information and we determined whether there were enough votes. Now in New York State, with this, with an improvement district, it requires either or at least 25 signatures of persons who are eligible to actually sign, or it requires a number equal to at least 5% of the persons that voted in the last gubernatorial election here in the town. Either or. And so the lower threshold here was 25 signatures. The petition was timely submitted with our town clerk. We went through it. We found that no, you've got more than enough signatures to meet that criteria. That just means that the appropriate petition's there. It opens the door for a potential election. Now, in New York State, with something like this, everything you think you know about elections really doesn't apply necessarily with this, because with elections we're typically voting for persons to hold a local, state, or a national office. That's not what this is. This is something for certain persons to be able to cast ballots on whether this improvement district goes forward. Now with it, a few things. There are timelines, and one of the things the town board is going to be asked to consider is adopting a resolution today that would essentially establish the special election. Now, remember, what's happened up to this point, the town board thought it made sense to go forward with the district. Some persons in the community signed a petition to challenge that. The town clerk received the petition. We went through it. And the town clerk has confirmed that yes, indeed, the type of petition was appropriate, and the number of persons that signed could sign it, and it brings it to this level. You've confirmed that to the town board. The town board accepts your determination, and that gets us to this point where you might adopt a resolution. Now, if you adopt a resolution, there are timelines on setting up a special election. In a nutshell, what you have is this. We have to work also with Jefferson County Board of Elections. You can't simply say, well, we'll kick this can down the road until the next general election in November. The law doesn't give you that flexibility. The timelines here, you've got to have a special election, and it's 90 days, at least 90 days after an appropriate petition is filed, but not more than, I think it's 105 days. So you've got a short window. We coordinate with the Board of Elections, and the target date for the vote would be September, let me double check here, wait a minute, June 21st. We've got June 21st, and that's in the notice of special election. I won't belabor the point because theoretically, if you go forward, you'll read the resolution out loud for everybody to have. Now with it, there are a few questions that probably come up. I just want to touch on quickly. So the question becomes, who can vote in a special election? Now remember, this is not a vote for public officials. It's a vote for uses of property for improvements. Now with it, so you've got the interplay between the state constitution, election law, town law. What you have is this. In order to vote, a person has to be a U.S. citizen, at least age 18, and they have to be a record owner of property in that district. That goes back to the few thousand pages to verify who are the actual record owners. Now with it, a person gets one vote. Now if John and Jane Doe, for example, I'll give you a few different scenarios here. If John and Jane Doe own one parcel, they each get to cast a vote. If John and Jane Doe, they own 4 parcels, they each get to cast one vote. So the fact that they might own more than one parcel does not give you more than one vote. John and Jane Doe still get that one vote apiece. If John and Jane Doe and their 3 kids own one parcel, John, Jane Doe, and each of the 3 kids get to vote as long as they meet the criteria, at least age 18, U.S. citizens, etc., if they're owners. So you get one vote. Now with that, the question comes into play, well, okay, what happens then if I'm a corporation or a partnership? Well, corporations and partnerships, they're not persons, they're not age 18, and sometimes people own property in LLCs. But remember, this is not an election for public officials. And so what happens is if that partnership, if that corporation, if that LLC designates a person, a managing member or the president or whatnot, to cast a ballot, that person, if they're on the list, they get to come in and cast the one vote for the property, okay? So we've got a lot of that spelled out, though, in a, I'll call it a quick fact sheet that we've prepared, and what my recommendation would be is that covers a lot of the information that probably citizens will have, and I really think that ought to be on the town's bulletin board, website, things like that that'll help answer questions. Now with elections, forget everything you think or we think we know about these elections for public officials. With these special elections, the law requires it be a consecutive period of time, 6 hours. You can't break it up, a full 6 hours on that one particular day between specific hours, 8 in the morning, 8 at night. We've simply arbitrarily picked a time of 1:30 to 8, so it's more time than the law requires, so it's got to be at least 6 hours. Town board, you're the body, you get to decide if you want to shift it somewhat, but the reason we said 1:30 to 8 was it hopefully will capture most individuals if they're interested in voting in the process. With it, there is no absentee ballots. It doesn't work that way. This isn't an election for public officials, so you've got to vote in person. And with it, there are paper ballots, and you can't designate a proxy to come in and vote for you. If you wish to vote, it is you who votes. Now, with it, a couple of things that you'll think about. So, well, wait a minute, how do we know who can vote? Because remember, if you're voting in a general election or special election for a person, well, Jefferson County will have the Board of Elections, they'll have the voter registration rolls. And if everybody's eligible, they can vote. That's not what you have here. What you have here is again, it's not whether you're just a registered voter. That factor doesn't apply. It's, are you a record owner of property? If you're a record owner of property, even if you're not registered to vote, doesn't matter if you're at least age 18, a U.S. citizen and owner, you get to cast your ballot in a matter like this. With it, in their wisdom, the state doesn't have voter ID. Well, they say that, but they do in part, because if you want to vote in a general election or a special election for a person, you've got to be qualified through the Board of Elections. So they've got to verify who you are. Remember here, we don't have that. What we've got is we've got the best information from the county clerk's office on who the record owners are. We'll have a list for you, Ari, where that list will identify each and every person who is a record owner of one of the 329 parcels in the town. And then the question becomes, well, wait a minute, how do we know whether a person can vote or not? How do we know who they are? Well, now, for instance, Mr. Johnson, Warren Johnson, I know you personally for many years. I know you're an owner of property out in Point Salubrious. Theoretically, Ari, you would recognize him and you'd come in and that personal firsthand knowledge is sufficient. But if you didn't know the person, then what happens is we've got the list and says, well, John Doe is an owner. Well, you'd have to ask John Doe for some form of identification that indicates that person is John Doe. And we'll cover that as you get to that June 21st election date, so that we can verify it, because end of the day, people who are eligible to vote, we want them to vote, but we got to make sure they really are the person who they say they are. So identification is a relevant factor here. It's pretty much up in the air what type of identification you're requiring. But that's kind of it. And really, really quickly, some over steps. Now with it, on the election, June 21st. So what happens is there will be canvassers who will take a look at, these are paper ballots, okay? It's not electronic voting, it's just paper ballots. Any person who's eligible, they cast their ballot. Simple proposition. The simple proposition that we suggested was, shall Water District number 6, also known as Point Salubrious, be formed? You vote yes, or you vote no. The vote is a secret ballot. It's put in a box. It's contained here in the town, and once the voting is stopped at 8 p.m., that's when the votes are canvassed, and we'll talk about that when we get to that point. But we will have inspectors here to basically keep an eye on it, and we'll double check. Just going to count the ballots in favor or against, and at that point we'll have the results certified. Now, if you think of it, the reason the vote is important in my mind is for two reasons. One, not simply because the state law requires it with a permissive referendum, but two, remember what's going on here. When you form an improvement district like this, New York State has, the state comptroller has a threshold. They have a threshold that says if you form a water district, and if the expected cost, the cost for a typical household, for EDU, is below a threshold, the comptroller doesn't get involved other than you file paperwork with the comptroller when the process is over. But if the improvement district might exceed that threshold, then even if everything goes forward, even if the votes are cast that support it, it still doesn't mean it's necessarily going to go forward unless the state comptroller says yes and approves it. And I, in my opinion, when a comptroller looks at these types of matters to give their approval, the fact that the public has a chance to participate, especially in a vote like this, it can really help one way or another. So if you think of it, a project like this, it doesn't happen unless the town board says yes, and then it won't happen unless the voters say yes, and then it doesn't happen unless the state comptroller says yes, and if all of that happens, then the reality is it still doesn't go forward unless the engineers can get the necessary grants that you're looking for, so the town board is comfortable trying to keep the costs as low as possible to move forward with the process. Now, it's not unusual for districts to be formed, and then all of a sudden, unfortunately, you wait a year, 2 years before the actual project, the construction begins. It sometimes takes that time to get the grants in place, to get the contractors lined up. So there still are many steps, even though I know that you folks have worked extremely hard for an awfully long time to get to this point. But in a nutshell, I think that's pretty much it, Mr. Supervisor. I'd be happy to answer questions if the board has some and go from there.
Does anybody have anything? I had a quick one. The canvassers, they would be partisan, and
Well,
would they be appointed by the Board of Elections or us? Or?
Yeah, well, no, one of the things that we did was this. I mean, in my office, we went through the process to make sure we were comfortable with what was happening. We also reached out to the Board of Elections because the Board of Elections, again, they typically deal with votes and electing public officials for state, local, or federal offices. They typically don't get involved with this. But as a practical matter, though, we went through the process with them to make sure that they agreed with us. They have. I thought they would, but I wanted to make sure, just because we don't want any wrinkles in the process. Now, they've given us a list of persons who are eligible, and you're correct, partisan, one Republican, one Democrat. Even though it's not for an office, we still have one from each party that comes in here. They participate, as well as, you know, our clerk will be present to go through the process. But they do work as a team to make sure that it's done fair. After the votes are cast, after they've been tallied, then they're gonna be secured, they're gonna be safeguarded here to make sure that, if somebody has any questions, we've got the answers for them. But if you think of it, the question comes into play that I show up to vote and I say, wait a minute, Jim Burrows, is he listed? You know, and you don't know it. Well, you'll have the voter registration roll to be used for this. You'll be able to check that I came in to vote. You'll be able to check that I provided identification, whatever identification is appropriate. Could be a driver's license, could be a social security card, it could be a student ID if you're at least age 18. Things like that demonstrate that the person is who he or she says that they might be. But there are again many steps in the process.
Anybody else have anything?
Well, there's no, what you call affidavit voting, then you're gonna know then and there whether or not you're eligible to vote.
Yeah, you're correct. So you can't get an absentee ballot. It doesn't work for these types of processes. It's not eligible for
I
that.
was talking affidavit where you go in to vote normally, there's a question whether or not you're qualified, so you have to stick it in the envelope,
No,
check it out later.
no. What happens here is we will have the actual list, and if a person comes in, we'll have it alphabetized, so they'll come in and we'll see who he or she is. They'll bring identification, and they'll cast a ballot at that point. Now with it, if you think of it, there is no specific minimum or maximum number. The key is majority rules on that. So if more votes say yes than not, then the district goes forward to the next step. If more votes say no, then it doesn't. It ends at that point.
I got a question. Shouldn't you post this before the election day? Because what if we have conflicts on who you're saying should be able to vote and who shouldn't? Because you can't do it that day.
I know that all the information I've gotten from I typically work through the supervisor, and I know that he speaks for the board that they want to make sure that more people than not have the information as soon as possible to participate. That's why this meeting is being held today, because the board thought it was important enough. They wanted to get this meeting in front of the public as quickly as possible with a special meeting. Now with it again, the key is you've got to pick a date that fits within the short time parameters, and the target date right now it's June 21, and although it's got to be at least 6 hours, the proposed target is to keep it open longer than that. So it'll be 6.5 hours from 1:30 until 8.
Yeah, my question's not about the vote, it's about leading up to it, like who's gonna be eligible? I wanna see my name on the list before I come in there.
And what we'll do is, we in my office, we've got the list right now, and I just didn't bring it with me, but what I will do is I'll make sure that within a week, you've got the list, and it is public information. It is public information, so anybody can look at it. If you wanna publish it on the website, that's fine, we can do that.
Sir, you keep saying target date, if that date changes, how much notice will there be before the target date becomes the real date?
Well, I think we'll
Well,
know
we're at
today.
that point right now.
Okay.
If there's any specific question that you don't understand about what Mr. Burrows has said so far, if you could pertain it to that. The resolution's in front of me to set the time and the date and the location. So I'll read that out loud for the board, and we'll
I just got
vote
one more
on it.
question.
Oh, and one quick point too. Yeah, and so for convenience purposes, the place to vote that we've got is here at the town offices because it's probably a little bit more convenient to vote here than it would be down in 3 Mile Bay. So there are little twists and turns in this.
I think we need to understand voting. There are a lot of trusts on the point. You have not addressed how a property is dealt with if it is in a trusteeship.
Okay, and we've got that on the sheet too. So
Okay.
if there's a piece of property, okay, and some people say it's owned by a trust, it's not. It's owned by the trustees in trust. Now, if there's the John Doe Trust, and if the John Doe Trust has Frank and Ann as trustees, Frank and Ann, each one of them are eligible to vote in this special election, okay? And that's just because we deal with trust, it's a unique animal, but that's covered in the sheet that will be on the website.
And do you have that information on who trustees are?
Oh, yeah, well, no, so again, what we did was this. The engineers, very good at what they do, but they pull the information from the county's website. Well, the county persons, they do a good job, but sometimes there's a delay. Sometimes information is not accurate. Sometimes a piece of property might be owned by 5 people. The county's website might reflect it's owned by 1 or 2. So because that's important as far as who's eligible to vote, who's eligible to sign a petition, who's eligible to give an easement, we actually have the lien searches. So we get the best information, but admittedly, if all of a sudden, if last Tuesday, John Doe sold their property to Fred Smith, well, our records would show that John Doe is the owner of the property. So by having information available, yeah, theoretically, if John Doe sold it last Tuesday to Fred Smith, Fred Smith would be eligible to vote. We'd have to update the information. So we'd require proof that Fred Smith actually bought the property and that Fred Smith would then be added, John Doe would be removed. So there's a lot of little fine tuning that can take place.
Before anybody can vote, they have to fully understand what they're voting for. So there should be a full disclosure information package prior to any kind of a vote, other than you like fresh water or not. You know, we need to know understand what the costs are gonna be, the impacts, how the water's provisioned, is it metered after it's provided to the house? What is an ongoing cost? Is it a one-time fee?
You won't see that information.
Well, I think we need more than just do you like fresh water or not.
Well, again, the key on that is this, the lengthy process that the town board goes forward with, you get the engineering map plan report that has hundreds of pages of that information in it, and that culminates in different orders that meet the requirements in 12A of the town law. And what you're also gonna see is the town board will consider a resolution that summarizes, I think, many of the key components with it. But the reality is you cannot and you will not have a proposition that's going to have multiple sentences covering multiple details. The proposition is one sentence that the Board of Elections approves.
But I think we need a little bit more information, basic concepts. Do we pay for the water? How much does it cost? Does it come to your minimum point on
That
your minimum point to
engineer's
press?
report is on the website.
Yeah,
Well, no, I think we don't expect everybody to go out searching the website. When you have your canvassers come out, they should have an information package, so people understand the impacts
You
of
won't
this.
get to have the canvasser. What you can do is
You're
this.
asking people to vote for something that, buy a pig in a poke.
Well, I mean, in all due respect, I think the key is, and I get it's an important issue, but that's why the town is a public body. You have the information publicly available, and everybody at their convenience, when they get the opportunity, yeah, do your due diligence. You're right.
But
sir,
you're
that it's
expecting a
important.
positive vote.
I'm not expecting
Well,
anything
well,
one way or another.
somebody is.
No.
And
No,
without providing
the vote-
sufficient
The
information.
vote is either to vote yes or to vote no on the proposition, and if that happens, there still are additional steps that are followed.
I understand that, but once you get so many of these votes and it goes to the controller, and then they can approve it with those votes, and then what happens? Then is there a secondary vote that we get, or is that it?
No, if,
So you're asking people the final vote, pro or con,
well,
not having any of this information.
Sir,
No.
maybe I can clarify it. Can the board state, or I should be asking the board, that because it's the 21st, we have time, will they have a public meeting, perhaps verbally, answering questions and cost and things of that nature, rather than asking elderly people or people that are not able to go on the internet to search for the true facts? Wouldn't an open public meeting prior to the vote be a wise idea, so that, I know it's gonna be controversial with arguing and all that, but wouldn't that be better than having people that don't have access to computers to look for information?
You already gave that out. Trying to control this a little bit, okay, so that there's understanding out there. We had, last fall, we had 2.5 months open public hearing.
In the fall,
We
no one's
sat,
here.
we've had several board meetings since then where we've gone over this stuff. Anybody wants to come in, the report is available physically. It's a packet about yay thick of all the engineering report that was done for this process. That same report is available on the website. So it's free access to anybody. They can call my personal phone number, and I'll meet them here on a weekend if they need to go through that packet. We're not trying to keep anything from anybody.
No, I think we realize that.
And we've been doing this right along at almost every
But I think
single
half the
board meeting.
population,
Sir, please,
go ahead.
please. We need to get moving forward if we're gonna get this done. Yes, Mr. Gore.
One question. Let's say it goes forward and they start construction. When do we start paying? When it's complete, when we have water, or as soon as it starts
Mr. Black,
construction?
as you know,
I don't.
this engineering report was an approximation of what might happen. The true engineering report a true engineer will have to be hired. It might not be the same one, it might be a different one. And that report we get when they actually wanna start construction, will be coming before this board, and we'll know those specifics a little better, okay? But we don't have that. They don't know how deep the rock is out there. They don't know so much about
Right, but
this.
that was my question. When would people start paying? When they begin the physical project, or when they have water actually coming
I don't
in?
think that's a valid question at this point. Until we get to that point, which
Really?
we might be a year or more away from,
Don't worry about it.
we'll have a better handle on this. I don't want this to get out of control because we're.
It is out of control.
Totally out of.
Fine, thank you.
My concern, and maybe it's not a valid one, but the election is on
Yeah, and then once
Wednesday.
we,
And a lot of people aren't here on Wednesdays. We aren't normally here on a Wednesday. So that means they're gonna have to take time off from work or whatever to come in to vote, like we did today.
I'm sorry.
But we were here this time. We're not always.
well, the general elections in New York State usually take place on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so that's midweek, and the reality here is trying to cast ballots on a Saturday or Sunday is not gonna work with the canvassers, so you're gonna look for a weekday. And to be honest with you, the thought process is you try to set it in the middle of the week that generally is the most convenient for most people, recognizing that at the end of the day, it's not ideal for everyone, but you're trying to take the broad brushstroke and work as best you can.
I have a question. We're on a private road. We have no services from the village at all. No plowing, no trash, no nothing.
We're
How's
not
that
the
gonna affect
village.
us
We're not.
or the town? But, I mean, we're on a private road. We have no services at all. But yet, we're gonna get water. A lot of us don't have any basements. We're only there 4 or 5 months out of the year. What's gonna happen? Do we pay to have the water turned on? Do we have to pay to have it shut off? How does that
Well,
work?
you don't even have to have water, but you'll still be part of the district and have to pay.
we still have to pay for it, whether you get it or not.
The actual use of the system is gonna be governed by a water use law. So if you think of it, multiple steps. One is do you move forward with district formation on paper? And assuming all that happens, and assume the comptroller says yes, then you get this on paper. You then have the next layer, if you think of it, which is going down the pathway of making sure you get as many grant dollars as possible, to try to control costs as much as possible, to decide when you proceed with it. Now with that, the actual pipes in the ground, that's gonna be governed by a water use law. That you haven't done that yet because there's no reason to go to that legislative step yet. But with a water use law, that's when as a board, you'll be going through a lot of those questions about the actual use of the system and how it's gonna be administered and enforced. All that comes later down the road, but you're just not there yet.
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make with everybody, is that there's so much of the specifics that's so far down the road that we have no idea what those answers are gonna be until we get to that point. You know, and we just have to get to that point. Right now, we gotta find out if the people on Point Salubrious want this or don't. That's what we need to find out. That's what this step is about.
What it's gonna cost.
Two things. I'd like to thank you for your patience and for going the extra mile with all the different times that you told people what was happening and when it was gonna happen, as much as you knew. And I like the idea of the summer people being included in the vote. Thank you.
I understand you have no great hair.
Included in the taxes.
We've been a couple of times to town board meetings, and we've asked a lot of questions. I did over 12 FOIL requests that were fairly simple. And many of them, I believe illegally, were not answered. You referred to the,
We're
may I
not here,
please finish?
We're not gonna go down that road right now. Mr. Burrows is the one that responded to every one of your
I'll be happy to
foils.
talk to Mr. Burrows, but the point is, we're asking for information so that people understand what they're voting about. And that's what I hear people here saying. Just the fact that you're not streaming this, just the fact that it's held at 3 o'clock when many people that have to work for a living cannot be here. We need to reach out to the people on the point. I carried that petition, Terry, and you know very well, if we hadn't done that, the town wasn't gonna help us. We asked a lot of questions to the town about the petition, and we don't know, and people can go back to the town board meeting if you still have it. I do want to point one thing out, which I think is significant, and I think it bears what our concerns are. You stood there as a duly elected member of this town board at a board meeting, and we asked the question, what about the state controller's office? Because I knew at that meeting, a letter had come into the board, and the sender of the letter was in opposition to the water district, and asked simply that it be read into the record. There was no mention of it at that town board, and I was there from the beginning to the end. So I asked you,
We
we
received a letter from the
understand, may I
state
finish
comptroller?
please? We understand that you're going to have to log objections to the water district with the state controller. And you stood there and said unequivocally that you did not believe that you were going to do that, and that there wasn't an avenue for us to speak either. I've talked to the state controller. I have the Part 85
Before
law,
we get too far out the
Gail,
pathway.
Gail,
but that needs to be
Gail,
followed.
please.
What I want to make clear is this, I don't want to get off track on whether FOIL demands were appropriate or not appropriate. I don't want to get into that as far as this. What I will say is I want to make sure the record reflects that what this town has done, and I represent most of the towns and villages in the North Country, what this town has done is with respect to the petition, rather than simply allow citizens to kind of flounder and make up their own petition, we submitted a petition that met the requirements to make it easier for citizens if they were interested. Ari had the information, your deputy had the information to make sure that citizens could get that, to circulate it. We also went through the process to make sure that everything was done correctly. The board, rather than simply have one public hearing that Article 12A, the town law requires, you had a public hearing not just one night or one time, you kept it open for almost 3 months. The information's on the website right now, the information's filed with the clerk, it's available for anybody. All this is making sure that citizens, whether they're for or against it, making sure that citizens have the right to cast their ballot. Because if you don't cast your ballot for it or against it, then the matter flounders. This is to make sure that people can cast their ballot in person, to make sure that if you're eligible to vote, you can vote. And rather than limit it to the 6 hours, it's been expanded. You can expand it further, but not beyond 8 PM. But the key is to make sure you give everybody a fair chance. That's what you're trying to do. That's what that resolution really does. It just moves the process down the road.
At this point, I'm gonna read the resolution and ask the board to move on it.
Just one question, when you're on the ballot, you keep talking about, and you said it's a total, is there a percentage, or if it's ruled by one vote, does that count, or does
It's
it gotta
just-
be a percentage?
No, it's just a majority. If there are 50 votes against going forward, 51 votes in favor of going forward, then that means it passes to the next level, which basically means then, okay, the state comptroller then gets involved and reviews all the information at that point to proceed. So it's not a percentage, it's just the most votes that are cast.
And the state comptroller at that point, will they have evidence that there was a 51 versus 50?
Yeah, what-
I mean, you have to provide
Yeah, yeah.
the, how much opposition there was to it.
Yeah, what happens is this, when the state comptroller is involved with these, to give their permission, the state law has a number of requirements in the application. You create the application. In my experience, the application, if you just follow that, is a bit incomplete. We provide more information to the state comptroller. The comptroller will get all the information as far as the public hearings, all the information as far as votes cast one way or another. And the comptroller just decides, based upon their experience and their expertise, whether it makes sense to approve the district going forward. But now that process, to be candid with you, state comptroller takes months. I mean, you submit the information to state comptroller, and it might be 6 months before you hear back from them. What's not uncommon is a comptroller will reach out and ask for additional information. So again, this process is not static, it's fluid. There's a great deal that goes into it.
We started this process a year ago, March.
That was before my time, I think.
Yeah, it was. But thank you for everything, being here to help us with the information. So I'd like to read the resolution and ask the board to move on it. Resolution of the Town Board of the Town of Lyme. At a special meeting of the Town Board of the Town of Lyme held at the town offices located here on May 25th, 2023 at 3 p.m. The full board was present. Whereas by order of this board dated September 14th, 2022, a public hearing was scheduled to consider the formation of Water District Number 6 within the town of Lyme pursuant to a certain revised map plan and report filed with the town clerk and which is incorporated by reference. And whereas the order scheduling the public hearing was duly posted, uploaded to the town's website and published as required by law on September 22nd, 2022. The public hearing was opened on September 27th, 2022, continued through December 14th, 2022, and a second notice of public hearing was uploaded to the town's website and published on November 15th, 2022, to consider all persons interested in the formation of Water District Number 6. And the town board also wrote residents seeking additional input associated with the proposed district and formation. Whereas in an effort to establish the proposed Water District Number 6, the town board of the town of Lyme adopted a resolution and order on December 28, 2022, which was subject to permissive referendum. And whereas a petition was submitted to the town clerk on March 8, 2023, and whereas information was obtained on all 329 parcels in the proposed water district from Brownell Abstract, amounting to over 2,000 pages, which allowed the town to determine accurate ownership of each parcel. And whereas the town contacted Jefferson County Board of Elections in order to determine how many town of Lyme residents voted in the most recent gubernatorial election, in the most recent 1,112 residents of the town of Lyme voted. 5% of those votes equates to approximately 56 voters. Thus, in order for the petition to be sufficient as to require a referendum, 25 signatures or 56 signatures, whichever is less, would be necessary. And whereas the petition which was submitted included 63 signatures, 59 of which were verifiable. And whereas the town clerk has ordered the opinion incorporated by reference that the petition is sufficient so as to require a referendum. Now therefore, on motion duly made and seconded, this board makes the following determinations, and it is hereby resolved. 1, the above recitations are incorporated herein. Number 2, a special election regarding the establishment of Water District Number 6 shall be held on Wednesday, June 21st, 2023. 3, the special election shall be held at the town offices located here. 4, the polls for the special election open at 1:30 p.m. and shall remain open for voting until 8 p.m. 5, the proposition to be voted on at the special election will be as follows. Shall Water District Number 6, Point Salubrious, be formed? This resolution is adopted as required by New York Town Law Number 82 as a prerequisite to the special election. The foregoing resolution was offered by board member Dan Villa and seconded by board member Julia Gosier. And upon roll call vote of the board was duly adopted as follows. Terry Countryman, supervisor, yes.
Could I stick something in there? Why, could we start this vote at noon instead of 1:30? There might be some people on their lunch hour be able to get in here, they might have trouble later. The law says we have to have minimum of 6 hours.
Yes.
We're 6.5, it feels like we're cutting it close. That's my take on it.
It's up to the board. If you wish to extend it, you can make it begin earlier, you just can't extend it beyond.
Well, I was just gonna start at noon.
Does anybody in the board have a problem with that?
I don't.
Is there any problem making
No,
it?
then what I would say is this, could I ask if there's a motion to amend the proposed resolution?
I'll make the motion that we amend the resolution to start voting at noon until 8 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Dan seconds, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried.
It's not much, but it's a little.
So, item number 4, the polls for the special election shall open at 12 p.m. and shall remain open until 8 p.m.
So then it'd be a vote on the amendment. If I can ask if there's a vote on the amendment to see whether that amendment is approved. And then if the amendment is approved, then we would vote on the resolution as amended, okay?
And I think we did that, though.
I was writing, you did that then
Yes.
both?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, we do have a motion from Dan Villa for the resolution, and we have a second by Julia Gosier. Roll call vote, Terry Countryman's a yes. Don?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
So moved.
Okay. So with that, what I will do is Ari, if I may, I will edit this and send the resolution tomorrow, so you've got the resolution as amended. Then after you get it completed, and I'll also edit the notice of special election. And then at that point, what I would say is this, it makes sense to begin the process of posting and uploading the notice of special election. Also, the next point, we'll get it published, we'll take care of getting it published in the Watertown Daily Times. The information that you have, continue those good efforts of trying to make sure the public is aware of it, so they've got access.
I can put your memo regarding the questions
Yes.
and answers, and I'll make sure that's on the website tomorrow.
Okay.
If you would copy me with,
I will.
with Ari, I will make sure that they get on the website tomorrow too.
Is there any way to do a mailing for this? I know you have to have this 20 days notice. You know, while there's a lot of people here, there's a lot more that still don't know. So can they do a mailing to announce this special election?
I'm sorry?
People, can they do a mailing? you know, we still have people that don't go to the website, they don't look at your board notice.
Well, I'm sure by Tuesday, the area might put it out by Facebook, and they might put it out by the MailChimp, that we have an email system.
He's asking if you could do a physical mailing to everybody who can vote, so everybody has, we notify as many people as possible and make a good faith effort to do that.
And as we have in the past, we'll do everything we can to reach out to every single person out there.
So what I wanna make sure that Aaron, you've got it in the minutes is this. So, under the election law and the town law, the requirements are to make sure that it's posted on your bulletin board, uploaded on your website if you have one, and then the publication in the Watertown Daily Times. So if the town board is interested in doing more than the law requires by individual mailing, you certainly can do that as well. But I would suggest it goes to the record owners of the property, each of the parcels. Presumably what would be mailed would be the notice of special elections. But if there's more, that's up to you. But I wanna make sure the record reflects that you're doing more than the town law requires or the election law requires.
And you know, the reason I'm saying that is that 329 parcels that Ariana sent me, as you know, is outdated, had old address, old owners, so he based that original survey that was done on mailings that were never received or were received by old owners of properties. I think it needs to be sent to current property owners.
And people
Just what
need,
makes sense.
and people need to know how you're going to charge them, because they still don't understand that if they don't take the water, they may pay as much as $1,200 per parcel that they own on the point, and that's important for people to know.
And we will, we'll make every effort we can to notify every single person. And everybody in this room, I hope you as town residents will do the best to get the word out to every single person that you know on Point Salubria. Please help us in that effort, because our goal is that every single person has a voice on that point. I don't live on that point, and I have, only interest I have in that point is to make sure that everybody gets served the right way they wanna get served. So, it's up, you guys, it's your point, it's your decision. Right. We already have,
Well, I want to make sure that I'm a little bit cautious on it, because again, the danger about doing more than the law requires, it runs afoul of Article 8, Section 1 of the New York State Constitution. The state constitution prohibits using public money for not legitimate purposes. And if you get involved with certain mailings, that can run afoul of the state constitution, because the law doesn't let you do that. But I think here, because if you simply say a mailing, if you're looking at that, the cost is so minimal, I don't see a challenge on it. I just want to be cautious doing much more than the law requires.
and that, yes.
Will we be able to check who is listed as ours is in a trust, so we wanna make sure both of us are listed. We are both trustees, but does the town have that information?
What will happen is I've got the information from the leads. I know that Ari, you've been bombarded with materials. What we will do is we'll have that list, and I'm gonna plan with it within a few days, making sure that it's here. It's a public document. You'll keep it, but copies are certainly available for the public if they're interested, so everybody can double check, and if there's questions or concerns, it can be dealt with in advance.
When will that be up? When will it be?
We've got that, but I'm gonna say within a week, we'll have that here in the town.
Not on the website.
Wait, can we have a date, just so we can lock it in?
I'm not gonna tell you how quickly the mail's gonna work to get that here, but we're gonna plan within the week.
And there's a long weekend here.
Okay, can we stop and get a copy of that?
When it's here, it will be a public document that's releasable, and although FOIL, you normally follow it, I'm gonna suggest that you dispense with the FOIL. If somebody wants a copy, they ought to be able to get a copy. That's my suggestion, you're the records access officer.
That was the only business we had on the docket today, or the agenda. So So I think I'm requesting that we go into an short executive session. Can I have a motion to go into executive session?
Are those handouts on the, are those handouts that you put together on voting?
No, we don't have them prepared right now, but they'll be available Tuesday or Wednesday. They'll be on the website tomorrow.
If you want to go to executive session, it has to be a motion to go to executive session.
Motion, thank the board, regardless of how we're gonna vote for that.
Yeah.